This countdown established that entitlement had limits. Reality did not care about perceived importance. It documented 8 cases in which refusal to follow basic safety rules led to fatal and entirely preventable outcomes. Each account began with repeated warnings and clear rules, and then it escalated into clinical, irreversible consequences. The countdown began with number 8. Evelyn Hart, 54, arrived at Westgate Mall just before noon, wearing her signature red blazer and carrying the authority of a regional retail manager. She was known among staff for challenging return policies and for demanding early access to seasonal displays. Complaints logged at 9:45 that morning, at 10:30, and at 10:58 already reflected her impatience. At 11:12, maintenance crews cordoned off the main escalator for scheduled service, erecting metal barricades and posting clear warning signs. Security logs showed Evelyn approaching the barrier at 11:16, dismissing staff explanations and insisting her time was too valuable to waste. When told again at 11:18 and at 11:19 that the escalator was out of service, she argued that the rules did not apply to her. At 11:20, she moved the barricade aside and stepped onto the immobilized escalator, where exposed comb plates and gears were visible. Within seconds, her scarf and right leg were drawn into the rotating mechanism. Emergency responders recorded a near-complete traumatic amputation at the knee, with rapid arterial blood loss. Despite resuscitation attempts, Evelyn was pronounced dead at 11:59 from exsanguination and multiple crush injuries. The official investigation confirmed all safety protocols were followed and barriers were properly in place. Security footage captured her deliberate bypass. Witnesses later described her as too impatient to wait 5 minutes. Marta Ruiz, age 46, arrived at the city zoo on a humid Saturday afternoon. Her camera was slung across her shoulder, and a bright floral dress caught sunlight at every turn. Known online as a travel blogger, she had already clashed with staff that day, complaining about ticketing delays, demanding access to a restricted viewing deck, and dismissing a posted feeding schedule as for amateurs. Her actions reflected a pattern of entitlement. At 2:19 p.m., witnesses observed Marta stepping over the wooden public barrier, just under 4 feet high, to position herself for a closer photo of the Bengal tiger exhibit. Staff intervened, issuing a direct warning and escorting her back. At 2:22 p.m., minutes later, she repeated the action, this time ignoring both signage and a second staff warning. By 2:25 p.m., a third incursion triggered a radio alert among keepers, who documented escalating concern in their logs. At 2:28 p.m., Marta entered the dry moat separating visitors from the primary enclosure. The tiger responded instantly, crossed the enclosure boundary, and launched a predatory attack. Emergency medical personnel documented deep puncture wounds to the neck and thigh, extensive lacerations to the scalp and arms, and crushing trauma to the left femur. Femoral artery transection led to rapid exsanguination. Despite advanced life support, Marta was pronounced dead at 3:03 p.m. The investigation confirmed all barriers and warning signs met industry standards, and staff response protocols were followed. Witnesses later reported she called others paranoid and overreacting before her final breach. The outcome was preventable. Tanya Blake, age 39, arrived at Skyline Amusement Park on July 22nd. She stood 5'7" and weighed well above the manufacturer's posted limit for the park's flagship drop ride. As human resources director for a mid-sized technology firm, Tanya was accustomed to making rules work in her favor. That afternoon, she challenged the ride operator's refusal to seat her, arguing discrimination and demanding to speak with a manager. At 3:05 p.m. and 3:07 p.m., staff explained the ride's harness system could not safely restrain her. Her waist measured 48 inches, exceeding the posted maximum. When the manager arrived at 3:12 p.m., Tanya insisted, and after a heated exchange, the operator overrode the restriction, manually checking the harness and relying on a sensor that flagged as closed despite the restraint sitting well above the required angle. The ride's control system, designed to log restraint positions and seat occupancy, recorded Tanya's harness as marginally engaged. Manufacturer specifications called for a maximum gap of 2 inches between the restraint and the seat. Tanya's exceeded 5 inches. As the ride reached its peak and initiated the 200-foot drop, the car subjected riders to forces exceeding 3.5 times body weight. Tanya's harness, unable to contain the upward momentum, allowed her torso to rise above the restraint. She was ejected at 3:16 p.m., falling nearly 90 feet before striking the platform below. Paramedics documented multiple long bone fractures, massive internal bleeding, and a catastrophic intracranial injury. She was pronounced dead at 3:20 p.m. Subsequent engineering analysis confirmed the restraint sensor had been manually adjusted, bypassing the safety geometry intended to prevent this outcome. The park's protocols and signage matched industry standards, but the override prompted by Tanya's insistence left the physics uncompromising. Witnesses described her as making a scene and holding up the line, while the investigation concluded the accident was entirely preventable had the posted restrictions been enforced. Caroline Moore, age 42, arrived at the downtown rail terminal just after 8 a.m., dressed in a Navy business suit and carrying a slim leather briefcase. As a finance attorney with a reputation for aggressive negotiation, she was engaged in a heated exchange with transit staff over boarding priorities at 8:02 a.m. 2 passengers and a platform attendant warned her to step back from the edge, but she dismissed their concerns, insisting she had a right to board first. At 8:06 a.m., CCTV captured her standing 1.2 meters beyond the yellow safety line, gesturing emphatically, oblivious to the approaching express train. The platform's safety markings were clear, bright yellow paint, tactile strips, and posted warnings about the dangers of standing too close. At 8:07 and 20 seconds a.m., as the northbound train entered the station at 55 miles per hour, aerodynamic pressure from the lead car created a sudden gust. Witnesses described a visible destabilization. Caroline staggered, lost her balance, and fell onto the tracks. The train operator initiated emergency braking, but at that speed, stopping distance exceeded 200 meters. Impact occurred less than 3 seconds after her fall. The autopsy documented catastrophic blunt force trauma, including multiple fractures to the skull, pelvis, and thorax, with instantaneous loss of consciousness. She was pronounced dead at 8:07 and 55 seconds a.m. The Transit Authority investigation confirmed all platform markings and protocols were in place, and staff had issued repeated verbal warnings. Surveillance footage showed Caroline's deliberate disregard for the safety boundary. Passengers later remarked she seemed more intent on winning the argument than on observing basic precautions. The survivability window in such incidents was measured in seconds, and investigators concluded the outcome was entirely preventable. Denise Kaur, age 37, arrived at the Riverfront Festival grounds in a silver tank top and designer jeans. She stood 5'3" with a curvy build. As a marketing consultant, she was accustomed to negotiating access and challenging event policies. Her entitlement was visible in how she approached staff and rules. On July 4th at 21 hours, 44 minutes and 50 seconds, she approached the perimeter rope set 250 feet from the launch zone, arguing with security that the restricted area blocked her view. Staff issued 3 warnings within the next 10 seconds, referencing posted signage and verbal instructions. The hot zone extended 600 feet from the mortar pits, and only licensed crew were permitted inside. Denise dismissed their concerns, insisting that public space rules gave her the right to stand wherever she wished. Witnesses later recalled her stating that the safety barriers ruined her fun. At 21:45, Denise crossed the rope, ignoring further appeals. Pyrotechnic logs from the event detailed that a 5-inch shell was scheduled for launch at 21:46, requiring a minimum safe distance of 350 feet by standard industry math, roughly 70 feet per inch of shell diameter. The shell detonated at a low trajectory, malfunctioning and bursting just 30 meters from where Denise stood. The malfunction produced a blast wave and a sudden overpressure that caused pulmonary contusion, commonly known as blast lung, along with full-thickness burns across 38% of her total body surface area. Shrapnel from the shell casing penetrated her left thigh and abdomen, resulting in rapid internal bleeding. Emergency responders initiated advanced airway management and fluid resuscitation, but Denise's injuries were incompatible with survival. She was pronounced dead at 22:42 from a combination of thermal injury, blast trauma, and hemorrhagic shock. The subsequent investigation confirmed the safety perimeter had been correctly measured and marked, and that staff protocols were followed. Witnesses and event staff described Denise as argumentative and dismissive of repeated warnings. Community response reflected limited sympathy, with many emphasizing that the rules were designed to prevent exactly this outcome. Brenda Cole was 49. She entered the Northgate Shopping Center parking lot just before sunset, her green cardigan and sturdy 5'8" frame instantly recognizable to regulars. As the sitting PTA president, Brenda was known for an assertive presence and a history of confrontations over parking enforcement and school event logistics. On September 14th at 6:52 p.m., she became embroiled in a dispute with another driver over a contested space near the main entrance. Security footage documented 3 separate verbal altercations within 3 minutes, each escalating in volume and intensity. By 6:55 p.m., Brenda positioned herself between a white sport utility vehicle and a reversing pickup truck, gesturing and shouting while ignoring repeated pleas from bystanders and a security officer to step aside. The pattern of entitlement was evident. At 6:55 p.m. and 13 seconds, the sport utility vehicle lurched forward as its driver attempted to pull away from the scene. Brenda, standing with her back partially turned, was pinned against the bumper of the adjacent truck. The force of the impact compressed her pelvis and lower abdomen against solid metal, causing immediate vascular injury. Emergency medical records described bilateral pelvic fractures, laceration of the internal iliac arteries, and rapid onset of crush syndrome, marked by muscle breakdown, release of toxins into the bloodstream, and multi-organ failure. Despite advanced trauma care and aggressive resuscitation, Brenda was pronounced dead at 7:27 p.m. from irreversible hemorrhagic shock and systemic complications. The mechanism was a textbook case of crush injury in an active traffic lane. Post-incident analysis confirmed that all driving lanes and pedestrian walkways were clearly marked, with security personnel present and visible. Investigators found no mechanical fault with either vehicle and no design flaw in the lot layout. Witness statements consistently noted that Brenda ignored at least 3 explicit warnings to move out of the traffic lane. National data on parking lot incidents highlight that over 2,000 serious injuries occur in such settings annually, with a significant proportion involving disputes and poor spatial judgment. Community reaction was subdued. Several shoppers described her as out of control and unwilling to listen to reason. The coroner's report concluded the fatality was entirely preventable, underscoring the lethal consequences of anger-driven decisions in active traffic zones. Andrea Morales, age 33, arrived at the Granite Ridge National Park trailhead just after sunrise, lacing up trail shoes and adjusting a GPS watch. At 5'6" and lean, Andrea was recognized in the local ultra-running community for her technical skill and her tendency to dispute park closures on social media. On September 3rd, geotechnical teams had posted closure signs and installed a steel cable barrier at the entrance to the Upper Ridge Trail, citing active rockfall risk after a 2.1 magnitude tremor the previous night. Rangers recorded 3 separate verbal warnings to Andrea between 8:54 a.m. and 9:10 a.m., each referencing both the closure order and the hazard assessment data displayed at the trailhead kiosk. She responded by citing her experience and dismissing the closure as unnecessary, then bypassed the barrier at 9:12 a.m., according to search and rescue GPS logs and time-stamped trail camera footage. The ridge trail switchbacks cut beneath a 40-meter granite face where recent fractures had been mapped by park geologists. At 9:15 a.m., seismic sensors registered a localized event, and a 1.5-ton boulder detached from the overhang, accelerating down the slope at an estimated 9.8 meters per second squared. Witnesses on the lower trail described a sudden, echoing crack, followed by the boulder impact near the third switchback. Andrea was found beneath the debris field, having sustained multiple long bone fractures, severe cranial trauma, bilateral thoracic injuries, and extensive internal hemorrhage consistent with high-energy blunt force from direct rockfall. Emergency medical teams reached her location at 10:41 a.m., but unstable terrain and ongoing rock movement delayed extrication. She was declared dead at 12:10 p.m. after failed resuscitation efforts. The investigation concluded the trail closure was justified by geotechnical survey data and that all warning protocols were observed. Search and rescue logs noted that risk to responders was heightened by the need to enter an active hazard zone. Fellow hikers reported Andrea dismissed the closure as government overreach and insisted on her right to proceed. The Park Service final report emphasized that adherence to posted closures was critical because geological hazards operated on physical laws indifferent to individual skill or confidence. Samantha Price, age 35, arrived at Clearwater Beach just after 2 in the afternoon. She stood 5'9" with a muscular build and wore a bright orange rash guard. As a fitness instructor, she was accustomed to leading group workouts and projecting confidence both in and out of the gym. On July 18th, lifeguards hoisted a red flag at 2:10 p.m., signaling hazardous surf and the presence of a strong rip current measured at 1.5 meters per second. The posted warnings included multilingual signage and repeated announcements over the loudspeaker. Samantha dismissed the first lifeguard's directive at 2:12 p.m., insisting she was a strong swimmer and accusing staff of exaggerating the risk. 2 more lifeguards approached at 2:13 p.m. and 2:15 p.m., each explaining the mechanics of the rip current and the danger to anyone entering the water. Samantha responded with increasing hostility, calling the lifeguards on a power trip and refusing to leave the sand. At 2:16 p.m., she entered the surf directly in front of the main lifeguard stand, ignoring shouted warnings from both staff and bystanders. Within 30 seconds, Samantha was caught in the lateral pull of the RIP current, which rapidly carried her beyond the designated safe zone. At 2:18 p.m., witnesses observed her struggling to maintain position as the current accelerated, drawing her away from shore. Lifeguards initiated a rescue protocol, deploying a rescue board and signaling for backup. Samantha attempted to swim directly against the current, a common but ineffective response that increased fatigue and accelerated the onset of drowning physiology. Clinical records and incident reconstructions documented the sequence. Initial panic triggered hyperventilation, followed by involuntary aspiration of seawater. Laryngospasm occurred, temporarily blocking airflow and trapping water in the upper airway. As hypoxia progressed, consciousness faded within 2 to 3 minutes of submersion. Water entering the lungs disrupted gas exchange, leading to pulmonary edema and rapid desaturation of blood oxygen. Cardiac arrest followed, typically within 4 to 6 minutes if the victim was not rescued. The rescue team reached Samantha at 2:22 p.m., but she was already unresponsive. Advanced life support was initiated on the shore, including airway management and cardiac compressions, but spontaneous circulation was not restored. She was pronounced dead at 2:52 p.m. The coroner's report listed asphyxia due to drowning, with no evidence of trauma or intoxication. The official investigation confirmed that lifeguards followed all protocols, issued 3 explicit warnings, and maintained a visible presence at the hazard zone. The red flag remained in place throughout the incident. Community response centered on the clarity of the warnings and the preventable nature of the death. Witnesses described Samantha as belligerent and dismissive, with several noting that everyone else had complied with the lifeguard's orders. The interval from rule violation to fatal outcome, less than 40 minutes, was among the shortest documented in local records, underscoring the lethal efficiency of natural hazards when basic safety instructions are ignored. Across all 8 deaths, one pattern stood out. Defiance of basic safety rules never bent reality. Entitlement did not protect any individual from measurable physical consequences. Ignored warnings became irreversible in seconds. These cases demonstrated that rules existed not to inconvenience people, but to save lives. In the end, self-importance offered no shield against danger. Think twice. Reality did not care who they were. Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more hard-hitting documentaries.